I will be recording that event like the others, so you guys can always come back to the event and to the presentation and rewatch it if you need. We will give it another minute before we kick off for anybody who is running late. So then we can start. Yes, another person. Oh, somebody else. Grace is joining us. Okay, so on my clock is 17 past now, so we can start. Welcome everybody to Made Masterclass with the Cooper Parry, where Chris will be talking to us that we should stop calling it R&D and talk about the reality to manufacturers. So I believe before we start, if everybody could put their camera on, so Yasmin will take a picture for the social media. You don't have to unmute yourself if you don't want to. I just want the camera on so we can see you.
Okay, so if everybody's happy now, I'm going to take a screenshot. So if you could all just give me a smile in 3, 2, 1. Lovely, thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Yasmin. So Chris is an R&D partner for Cooper Parry, and he will be delivering the presentation today. And after the presentation, you will be able to ask any questions you have for Chris. And after those questions, we will be going to smaller breakout rooms where you can explore on the subject covered today. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Anita. Okay, so let me just share my screen. So hopefully everybody can see that.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So let's dive into it because we haven't got long. Just move to the next slide. So the agenda for this morning, like I said, we haven't got very much time, only 15 minutes for the presentation before we get into questions and then breakout rooms. So I'm going to do a very quick introduction to myself and why we're here. We'll then get into the criteria and what it really means for manufacturers, a couple of client testimonials that are relevant, then what's really needed to make a claim, and finally, what are HMRC doing about this? Because it's obviously very generous relief, but over the last few years, there's been an awful lot of people entering the market claiming to be able to do claims, etc. And what are HMRC getting a bit upset? And so what are they doing about it? And what does that mean for claimants? So quick introduction. So yeah, I'm Chris Knott. I'm the R&D Incentives Partner at Cooper Parry. Know a bit about this subject. Been doing it for 22 years since the scheme was introduced. I've been in tax for 27, engineering degree background, and now chartered tax advisor qualified. So I talk about being able to talk upstairs and downstairs to the finance bods. What's it going to mean for the tax? And go downstairs and have some modicum of understanding, at least, about what the guys are doing on the shop floor. 18 years up north, based in Yorkshire, and ultimately for the last 8-9 years of that, leading a Big Four's R&D team. Last 9 years down in the Midlands. So always good old-fashioned manufacturing heartland, and seeing a lot of claims from a lot of the sectors that you guys will be from. Known Charlie for a good few years now, wanted the Made in Midlands patronage for a while because I thought we could help. And so wanted to do a masterclass pretty soon to start imparting some of that experience and knowledge across to the members. So let's get into it. I've been beating this drum for many years about not calling it R&D. Because it really isn't, to be honest. If I was to say how many times I'd made a claim for something that I would call R&D outside of work, we'd probably be talking the fingers of one hand. Because what tends to come up a lot is farms and chems. People, you talk about R&D, people talk about farms and chems, rocket science. Yeah, of course. That's really the R end and probably the blue sky end of R. It doesn't really talk to the D if you look at a traditional view of what's R&D. So the name I've always described as a bit of a red herring. I couldn't find a red herring that was disguising itself as something else, so I went with the goldfish. That was the best I could find. So on the next slide, there's also a lot of common misconceptions about R&D and what can be claimed. What boxes do you need to tick to be able to claim? All of those things in the middle, they're all pictures of artificial producers of light, aren't they? So we don't have any new products. So that our products still do the same as what they always did. Well, the ones on the right do exactly the same as the one on the left. And so I'm just going to pick out a few of these because these are some of the things that we see all the time. I'm just going to do 3. So we don't have any new products. You don't need to have a new product. You can be making improvements to existing product ranges. You can, in fact, even be making changes to your manufacturing process. And we'll get onto some of the things that qualify in a bit. So there seems to be this misconception that you have to have a new product, this whizzy new product that's going to wow the market. No, you don't. We don't do R&D in our industry, bottom left. We get that a lot. And that just goes back to that initial, everybody thinks about this wider traditional view of R&D. And again, the criteria, as I'll get onto on the next slide, is very much a tax definition of R&D. And so if you are making something, as you'll see, hopefully, in the next slide, you will hit the definition. Third one that I want to pick out, top right, our projects come from customer requests. Doesn't matter. Got challenged recently by HMRC. Case actually went to court, and the taxpayer was found to be in the right. So HMRC's challenge was thrown out. And so especially a lot of smaller companies, if you're not at the startup end where you really have come up with something brand new, the sort of mid-size SMEs tend to have a lot of their work does come through bigger companies. So yeah, if you're an auto parts manufacturer, some of your requests for projects will come through from the bigger guys. That's okay too. And so if you're a brake manufacturer and you're a brake pad manufacturer, for instance, you're now making a particular brake for a particular model. Jag, JLR don't really care that you're having to do some R&D at your end. And the fact that you do is okay. And the fact that they are requesting that work from you and you are producing a product that you then sell to them, that's absolutely fine. So there's a few things there that come up all the time. So the criteria in reality, there's a lot of obviously lawyer speak, tax legislation, etc. There's even HMRC's own inspectors manuals guidance you can go and read online and get, well, probably I say confused, but actually when you go and read it initially, it probably looks quite simple, but then you read it some more and then everybody gets confused and talks themselves out of being able to qualify. And so having done this for so many years, I've tried to think of a way to kind of boil down all of the criteria and all legislation to essentially 2 words, and they're the ones that are ringed. So the first bit is essentially talking to the bit in the legislation that talks about needing an overall advance in a field of science or technology. And now that overall advance can be, like I said, new product, it can be existing product, can be process. But essentially for a manufacturer or an engineering company, what does that mean? Well, it means that we're changing something. Because it can be an appreciable improvement to something that already exists, then we're looking to change that widget, process, whatever it is, in some way to make it better. And the next slide's got a list of what better might mean in what areas, but essentially we're changing something. And then the second piece of legislation, and that's particularly pertinent, talks about there needing to be an element of the resolution of technological uncertainty. Scrub that out. It was hard. It was difficult. We had to think about it. Our engineers had sleepless nights, stood around scratching their head, sharp intakes of breath. I'm not sure about that. I might have to think about it. Typical engineer's response, manufacturer's response. Effectively, what it means is challenge. In making those changes that we're trying to make, we have to think about them for a bit. Yes, we've made widgets for 20 years. We know how to make widgets. Someone's come up and asked us for a widget that does something slightly different. Have we got one of those on the shelf? Have we got a blueprint in the drawer that we can go and pull out and just stick it down to the production manager to run it through the factory? No, because it's a bit different in some way. So we're going to have a look at it. 2 very positive correlating factors to represent sufficient technological uncertainty: time and testing. So the longer something takes, the people that have been doing this for years, must be something new, must be something different, must be something challenging enough that it's taking some time. Testing, just another word for technological uncertainty. We think we're heading in the right direction with the changes that we've made to try and get to where we're trying to get to. Okay, let's check that we're heading in the right direction. So anywhere where you're testing, you don't know you're heading in the right direction, so you're checking. Again, it's just a good indication of this technological uncertainty. So change and challenge, that's all we're looking for. So in reality, you're doing R&D from a tax perspective, you're just calling it something different. And so again, I just want to pick out 3 of these because there's an awful lot of stuff there, and read these in your leisure. So product development, yeah, that's the obvious one, right? Especially if it's new. Go back to this improvement point. So yeah, new materials, adding new functionality, increased durability. We'll go back to the good old brake pads or whatever that you're making. So all of that kind of product development, that's kind of more obvious R&D. A couple of less so. Process engineering, mentioned it a couple of times now. Manufacturing efficiency, for instance, and it kind of half of the list on the right probably actually should be a subset of the process engineering. So traceability, sustainability, increased yield and throughput. Doesn't mean just buying a bigger machine, that doesn't qualify. But customizing and bespoking a machine that did 80% of what you needed it to, but didn't quite do what you needed to, and certainly didn't fit into your current floor setup. So increase yield, throughput, decrease wastage, and increase recyclability. Anything with green agenda, government loves. So all those kind of things all talk to that process engineering. And the final one I just want to pick out while we're here, and given the time we've got, is value engineering. So everybody's always squeezed for margin. So we've got a product, we've had it for a good few years, it's made out of steel and it does a particular job. We want to strip some of the cost out of that, so we use cheap grade of steel. Cheap grade of steel is cheaper for a reason. Strength properties aren't as good, tensile properties aren't as good, heat resistance isn't as good. So there's a problem with it. So in order to use that cheaper grade steel, we have to do a value engineering exercise. 6 months later, yeah, we're now using that, and the performance is exactly the same as it was before. We haven't improved a thing as far as the external market can see, and it still looks like it's made of steel. But we've gone through a value engineering process, and that kind of thing qualifies as well. So I guess part today is just to start getting everybody thinking of just a bit more widely and a bit more open-minded about it. Really isn't R&D. Yeah, a lot of the projects that manufacturers are going to be doing are going to be hitting an awful lot of the things that are on this particular slide. So moving on now to just a couple of client testimonials, and ones I've tried to steer away from the ones that just talk about our service, etc., because that's not what today's about, but about claiming. So first one I love, and this was a pressings manufacturer near Tamworth, and so much so that in a presentation on something else that we had in the office, the FD at this place actually stood up and sort of said how surprised he was and how pleased he was that didn't think they qualified at all. We're just metal bashers, didn't think we do any R&D. They've been claiming for over 40 years now. Second one again, companies just aren't aware of the benefits. We were one of them. Specialist clothing manufacturer in Hinckley. Again, clothing, textiles is not something that you would instantly think of as big R&D advocates and doing lots that would qualify, but they are, and were and still are. Third one, again, just talks again to that process, but just to hammer home that it's not just the new products. Same £1,000 each year. So again, a manufacturer based in Alfreton, that one. So they are companies just like all of yours across the board. And the point with this as well is that even if you are claiming, and there's less and less, I guess, that we find nowadays that aren't at all, I claim in everything that you should be, because it's very easy to miss some stuff in terms of what you're actually claiming for. One of the other ones was about kind of, we claim for our R&D team or our specialist engineering team. Well, that's great, but what about everybody else that you're allowed to include completely and utterly within the legislation that people miss off? And so 2 ways to make sure you're claiming everything: get all the right activities and get all the right costs. And people quite often miss elements of both. So what's really needs to make a claim? Well, in essence, it's actually quite straightforward. Yeah, you need a UK-based trading corporation tax governed entity. And so it just means that if you're a university or a charity, you can't claim. And so a good old-fashioned PLC limited company in the UK, trading, doing something, that's all you need to start with. That's the basics. And you need to claim a number on a corporation tax return with a signed set of accounts. And so yeah, you can do a December 21 year end now because December's just finished, but you can't submit it until the accounts are signed off. So typically, claims won't for December 21 year ends won't go in until April, May time. But claims can be turned around very quickly. So what do you actually need from an R&D perspective? Well, a report for HMRC. They had told me, obviously over 22 years of talking to them, 3 things that will increase your chance of getting a claim looked at. 1, no report, because you've clearly not told them how, what, or how much. How have you come up with the projects that qualify and the costings? What are you actually claiming for? Tell us about it. And you don't need to tell them about every claim, every project, sorry, either. One of the previous claims I had up north, nuclear engineering company, 1,500 project lines, and then never mind the sub-project lines. Are we going to write about all of them? No, we write about 1 or 2, because the important big thing is the how. Tell them about the methodology. How have you come up with what you're claiming? Records, yes, you do need some records. You need to be able to back it up. We don't need timesheets. They're actually quite pragmatic in terms of what you need to be able to back that up. And there are other methods of record keeping and saying what you've worked on and who's worked on them. And that's okay. So it's actually quite straightforward, but more and more, you've got to make sure that, in principle, it's straightforward, but you've got to make sure you get it right, because there's an increased look by HMRC at wanting to make sure that they're not just losing money hand over fist. This is costing about 6 billion a year now, and so it's getting quite interesting from a treasury perspective, and especially on the SME side, it's very generous. You get 25% benefit essentially for SMEs, and they're tax paying 33% if you're wanting some cash back. And so very worth having a look at whether you qualify or not and making sure that it's everything you should be, but also very easy to get drawn into claiming for things you shouldn't. And so final slide is a quick look at HMRC's response to this shark filled market. Like I said, a lot of experts have popped up over the last 2 or 3 years as all the rest of the whizzy stuff in the tax ledger has been legislated against. And so what are they doing about it? They've been getting increasingly frustrated, as has the Chartered Institute of Tax themselves. And so again, a couple to pick out here: 100 new tax R&D inspectors. Moderately annoying for us, to be honest, because essentially we train them up on the job, but with some of the questions that they ask in their reviews, and we've been through this cycle about 4 or 5 times now over the last 20 years. So that's quite interesting, that they have realised that they need to sort of ramp back up. A lot of inspectors over the last couple of years have obviously been pulled away looking at furlough claims and things like that, but they realise that that's not good enough, and so they need to restock their pool of inspectors. Another one is the prior notification of intention to claim. So that's one that they're looking to bring in potentially next year. And I'll link that with transparency of advisor on the left-hand side and digitalization. All of those things are things that they're looking to bring in from April next year, basically because they want better traceability and accountability. So if you're using an advisor, they want to know who it is. And so advisors with, shall we say, less than scrupulous reputations, HMRC can't say who they are, but they've clearly got a list. And so just be careful with things like that. And you're going to have to be much more open about stuff like that and notify them of your intention to claim. So they want to have probably a sneaky look at you up front. And so one of the things I always tell people, freebie, here's a freebie, make sure your website is giving them that warm fuzzy feeling when they first have a look. And so things like awards that you've won, make them front and center. Have us, if you've got your drop down boxes, drop down tabs at the top, about us, products, etc. Have an awards section there. They will be drawn to that. They have 10 minutes to decide whether they like your claim or not. So make it easy for them. Think of it as like an exam question. Final thing, Chartered Institute of Tax Guidance re R&D advisors, bottom right hand side. COT themselves have HMRC jumping up and down about sort of claims going in for things that really ought not to. COT think, well, if anyone's got any teeth, we probably have. It's in our book. And so they put together a working practices group back in 2019 and actually issued their own guidance in June 20 around what to look for when choosing an advisor, what to expect, and things like that. And so CIOT have actually got involved and have issued some guidance around that. So I guess the point of that slide is HMRC realise this is costing a lot of money and want to start having a look at it. So just make sure that you're you're doing it right, stay on the right side of the line. And that doesn't mean that, yeah, there's a line. Don't stand so far away from it that you need a pair of binoculars to see it. You don't need to do that, but just make sure you're getting the right advice. That's not necessarily us. There's plenty of good advisors out there, and they're with you with them. Absolutely fine. That's all good. So that's me. Very, very quick run through some of the things that we see all the time, and the main takeaway for me is going back to that, stop calling it R&D, and narrowing it right down to that change and challenge, and then looking at that additional slide in terms of what does that really mean for manufacturers in sort of language that you guys will see every day in the in your businesses and in your sectors. And so that's it from me.
So thank you, Chris, for the presentation. Very informative. And do you guys have any questions? If you do, please unmute yourself. And after the event, I will send the presentation and Chris's details. So if you could take the presentation of Chris so I can see who has a question and actually call the name out. Okay. Anybody have questions in the open room, or shall I send everybody to breakout rooms? If you do have a question, please.
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Anybody?
Just to say before we do, I've got a couple of my colleagues with me, so I think there's going to be 3 breakout rooms, and so I've got a couple of my leadership colleagues with me to help out.
Okay, so there is Mark, Frost, and Donna who will help Chris in the breakout room. So if there are no questions in the open room, I will send you all to the breakout rooms now, and we'll give you about 15 to 20 minutes if you have for the chat with our experts. So if you follow the instructions on your screen.
Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back. Oh, we've got 1 room back, so there is 2 rooms. No, still 1 room, so another 30 seconds and everybody will be back. Did you have enough time to chat, guys? Has everything been covered? All the questions? Fantastic. So after we finish, I will send the presentation and Chris's details as well. If anything pops to your minds, you can always email him or give him a call. I know you were with Mark in the room, but you will have both details. Okay, everybody are coming back now. Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Okay, so
Hello again.
Hello again. Thanks everybody for joining. And as I've mentioned, after the event, I will send you all the presentation and Chris's details. So if anything else pops to mind, you can always, I guess, email him or give him a call, and he will be there for you. And tomorrow we have the first breakfast morning in 2022 with the WH Tilsley, Malthouse Engineering and the ACE Group. So who didn't sign up yet, go ahead and sign up. David is with us today. He will be one of our speakers. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 9 a.m. and have a nice day.
Nice Johannesburg.
Thank you, Nessa. Thank you.
Thanks, Nessa. See you tomorrow, David. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Mark.
No problem.
Donna.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.